Ken, get ready to lower your standards for this theme song. Nick, I picture this one with production that's kind of like Land Down Under, like Men at Work, you know. So you got to elevate when I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Show, it's the Showrunner Show. Show, it's the Showrunner Show. The Showrunner Show.
Not bad.
I mean, I'm real distracted lately. I have other things on my mind, so there won't be lyrics anytime soon.
Yeah. The writer's strike is over, so you're gonna get less sizzle on the songs.
Yeah, you can see how dumpy the background is. The songs are gonna get real basic.
My question was, do you do the music too?
No, Nick does, the producer.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
it was such
done.
a delight
Great combo.
too. I thought like when he didn't even, I think, ask or anything. He just started.
He just dropped it in.
He just dropped it in. It was like, what magic is this?
That's incredible.
Genius.
He's been amazing. Yeah, and I just love the little like sizzle and spin he gives to all the songs. It's just so great.
Yeah, well, it's like feels like, you know, professional level. I'm like every time I'm like I love seeing which one's gonna come out. Like how's it gonna be? So wait, do we get two? Actually, I'm gonna ask, do we get two because of the two
one
episodes?
for each. You'll get a fresh
one
for
for
the
each.
next one.
All right.
Yep.
New one.
Hey Ken. Oh, I guess we should do the intro, but then I have an important question for you, Ken.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV, who wants to work in TV, or just wants to know how it's all made. I'm John Eric Dowdle.
I'm Stacey Shabosky, and we're so psyched you're here.
This week we're discussing the ins and outs of the studio relationship, and we have Ken Segna, who is most recently the head of TV development at MRC. You know, correct me if I get any of this wrong.
Yeah.
Working on shows like The Girlfriend Experience and American Gods. He and his brother and wife are kind of the mirror image of Drew, me, and Stacey too. His brother is also senior vice president at development at Legendary, formerly at Paramount Television, and his wife is an exec at Netflix. I don't know what like role she has there, but development.
We're all, like we all met. Bryan I met quite a while ago, but I met LD Laura at CAA when we were both assistants, and she was at So I went over to Stars for a while, and then she jumped over to Fox 21 for a spell, and then after that jumped over to Netflix. And Bryan has been he actually had a very interesting route. He went FX, CAA to FX, and then he went to business school. Then came back to our crazy industry. And has been kind of on the studio side at various places like UCP and now Legendary, for a while. So
that's interesting.
A family, also all in this wild business of ours.
Even down to the brother being business school. That's so Drew.
Drew went to business school too. Drew did.
I didn't know that. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah,
Drew,
he
used to be an investment banker.
Yeah, he was an investment banker before I slowly picked away at his stable lifestyle. And, got him to make terrible life choices. Yeah.
He could have been an uber fit, thrice divorced man in a $20,000 suit in Manhattan if John hadn't intervened.
Another life.
So Ken, I have an important question to ask. It's the elephant in the room. It has never been a more intense or more exciting time to be named Ken. How are you feeling? How are you feeling in 2023, having what was a perfectly normal name until very recently?
Well, it's funny because literally growing up when I was little, I would always get the where's Barbie, from kids at school and things like that. And then it died out for quite a while. Sure. I forgot about it. And then this year, all of a sudden, in Starbucks or whatever, I'll get the where's Barbie? And I will say it is truly the weirdest movie-going experience that I've ever had. Just hearing your own name a million times in 90 minutes is so bizarre. I was like, I have to go see the movie again because I really liked it, but I was kept getting pulled out. I gotta settle into the the Kenergy, I guess.
The Kenergy, that would be so weird. I anticipate amazing. A lot of I am Kenuff t-shirts the next time you have a birthday or the holidays?
Oh, I mean, Halloween was very funny. I was like debating being Alan because I was like, I cannot go as Ken. And then
That's genius.
And then my daughter took over and, asserted dominance in the Halloween costumes. And so we were all like Frozen themed. It was like Elsa, Anna. Luckily I was Kristoff and not Sven, for those of you who know all the characters. And he's
the reindeer.
The guy, not the reindeer. Yeah.
No,
you were the love interest.
Yeah. And then our 4-month-old son was Olaf, which blew her mind. But there were a lot of Kens out there. I had a lot of people, a few friends that were like dressed up as Ken, which I thought was very funny. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Good. Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Right? It had to be. It had to be discussed.
It had to be said. Had to be discussed.
If you wouldn't mind, talk us through your studio journey, your journey to where you are now.
Gosh, we can bring it way back to me and Bryan growing up in a suburb of Sacramento. If you saw Lady Bird, that was one town over from ours. Granite Bay gets a nice little shout out in there for a second. And yeah, our dad, he's retired now, but he was a veterinarian. He was the town veterinarian. My mom, accounting and bookkeeping. So no ties to the industry at all. I think they were a little confused how we both ended up in there, but I sort of think it's their fault because there was a rule in the house. We didn't have cable and we only got an hour of TV a week that we got to choose. And so of course we both became TV execs. It was destined. But I took we both kind of took different routes. I did undergrad more of a computer science focus, it was called symbolic systems. And then, but I always loved, photography, watched movies constantly. And so I applied to USC. I got in there to the grad program. And then while I was there, I started doing, more producing than anything was the thing that I gravitated toward.
What was your master's in? Is it just master's in the film department, or do you have to be producer, director, writer?
Basically, so I did the film production track. So there's Stark, there's writing, and there's film production, which is kind of the general catch-all of that. That was the one that I did. And so you kind of do a little bit of everything on everyone's projects. But the thing that I really kind of ended up doing mostly toward the end was the producing side. And then coming out of it, I had a friend, Mary Pisacco, who, I know there's...
Oh my God, exactly. Crazy. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so right there, that we did that together coming out of film school. Did some music videos. I
can't see because it's backward. Is that the Ain't In It for My Health?
Yeah, exactly. That's
oh my God. Doc. Yes, cool.
Yeah. And so we ended up doing that. That was a really cool but very long experience because we just kind of dove in and we're we're going to film a bunch of stuff and then we're going to figure out how to edit it. And, during the process, I got interested in TV, but I didn't really know anything about it other than, I was watching the DVDs of 6 Feet Under and The Wire and Sopranos while I was at film school and just being man, why is no one talking about this stuff? This is incredible. And so I got really interested. Bryan had gone to UCLA undergrad, came out and went directly to CAA in the feature department as an assistant. So he was well, if you want to learn that, come work for a TV agent. So I went over there. I worked for Kevin Cooper in TV packaging for a year. And then heard about a desk opening up with Carmi Zlotnick, who was going over to Starz. And actually, Chris Albrecht, Carmi Zlotnick, those were two of the kind of key people at HBO with all of the stuff that I had been watching. It was enamored. So it was really neat to kind of learn from them and be a part of the process of helping build out a network at Starz in a very different way than HBO. And so initially I kind of actually looked at that as the stepping stone to how can I produce, because that's what I was interested in. And people like Carl Beverly, Sarah Timberman, that. A lot of people had kind of a background that felt oh, go to a network or a studio and then you can, eventually jump out. And so I kind of was initially thinking of it as a stepping stone. And then I got over there and I was oh, this is incredible. I really liked that side. And we were very hands-on in a fun way with production and development. And so I was there for like over 9 years, like, yeah, almost a decade.
Wow.
Which is a fun ride. Because it was kind of Wild West of we're trying a bunch of stuff out. And then, Power was like, I think the first thing that I covered, a point as an exec.
Good for
and,
you.
And it was like Courtney Kemp, like, obviously she had a long track record in TV and experience up to that point, but I think it was the first thing that she ever actually came out pitching and just like sold it, got it greenlit, the whole thing. It was a really fun ride. And then that and Outlander kind of became, kind of the two of the big tent poles over there. I was over there for, like I said, almost a decade. And then, loved everyone, but it was like time for a new challenge, and went to MRC. And yes, we worked with them a lot on shows. And so did the studio side. And actually, Girlfriend Experience and American Gods, those were two also at Stars. And then, MRC, I jumped out, and we did, kind of like Terminal List, Shrink Next Door, Shining Girls, like a whole run of stuff. We had a lot that was up and running, The Great, obviously, and Poker Face with Ryan Johnson and Tasha Leone. So it was like a really, really fun run. Happened to be in the middle of a pandemic, which was, I know for everyone, a super fun time. But yeah,
I loved it.
Yeah, exactly. It was, I will say, I don't know how you all experienced it, but I will say, as tough as it was, as crazy as it was, one of the things I took away from it was so incredible to see, frankly, our entire industry just pivot and figure out how do we do things very differently and very quickly get things up and running and like set a system and just like keep going. I thought it was a pretty inspiring and incredible thing. So and then was there for a little over 3 years, and then jumped out, and now kind of working on my own stuff and getting things up and going, and it's been a good ride.
Sounds like you've worked on the network side, you've worked with producers, you've worked on the agency side, you've worked on the studio side. So, what would you describe, how different are those jobs? For somebody who's, getting into TV and is like, oh, this is a nice chance to hear the differences of those jobs and what they do.
There's some that I feel like there's the overlapping skill sets in terms of everything in my mind is always, about how do you find people that have a vision and a voice and help champion that, through the process. And it's just kind of where are you in the process to a degree, I think. And there's, kind of the fun parts and the challenges of each of those positions. Like on the network side, there's a lot that comes with that in terms of there are always going to be shows made. You are going to put something on the air. It's really more just kind of filtering, all right, which ones are we going to back? Which ones are we doing when? And shepherding that process. And frankly, each network I think is very different in the way that they operate. Some, like Stars, when I was there, we were very hands-on and very involved. And then there are some that are really lean back, kind of very much, they have a lot of volume, and kind of it's really kind of up to the producers in the studio to manage the process. And so depending on the style, I think that's one thing. If you are interested in the executive side, the network can be kind of the last decision point, which there's the great thing about that. If you're in the right place, you can walk down the hall, talk to the right person, and have a conversation where you convince them, let's go do this thing, And then on the flip, you are inherently a little further away from the actual development of it. You're not in those day-to-day conversations, or frankly, if you are, I think something is probably going wrong. So you kind of need to bet on the team and let them do their thing to a degree. The studio, obviously you're, in a different vantage point. And I think it depends on what type of studio. There's Stars technically had a studio in the sense that we wholly owned and produced some of our stuff. And, so there was no daylight between the studio and the network in that case. It was the same people all doing it. It was the same
it wasn't two different teams?
No, we wow. For instance, we had our production team was the same production team, and like for instance, Power was ultimately a wholly owned show, and so that was one where we were just in it. We hired everyone, did everything, along with the team. And then there were ones like Outlander that were licensed from, in that case, Sony, outside studios. But it was all the same team. It wasn't separate.
Cool.
Yeah, it was fun. And then there are like the more in-house studios like UCP and places like that, 20th, where they will sell to outside places, but a lot of their business is directed at their, kind of sister platforms. And, that is a different stance, I think, and a different dialogue between those companies. And then there's places like MRC, which are totally independent. And, that I think is a different vantage point, and very much, eat what you kill, where it's like, that, and that is the other thing where there's, I think the difference between like the network side and the studio side in that sense, especially on the independent side, is you have the flexibility to go everywhere, but the bar is higher to like clear and actually get things sold. And yeah, I mean, it's like, you very much, there is no guarantee that you're going to have shows. You have to go sell them. And, so that I think is the other thing. It's, you can have years where there's a lot going on, and then years where there's less, especially with like, I think there will be less of this, but, with the limiteds being a big thing, you could have, a year where you have a few of those, and then next year they don't continue. So like, even if it was great and everyone loved it, there's not another one. So yeah. And, obviously the production side, depending on what type of producer it is, like, yeah, where you are in the system. Are you just there to help sell it, package it, get it in the door, kind of be involved in that part of the process? Or are you somebody who's actually on the ground? It's a very different lifestyle than most of the time being in an office. So, all very different.
That's really cool. Like, would you, just for people who, are maybe kind of new to this space, like describe like what the different functions of a studio versus a network, like, or a producer, versus, taking the showrunner side, like a producer versus a studio versus a network, and just sort of the different roles they play?
I think on the producer side, kind of, yeah, it's such a catch-all term, where I've had people who are not, friends who are not in the industry say like, oh, like executive producer or producer, what does that mean? And you try to describe, I mean, there are people who are writers or creators of the show, and that's one type of producer. But in that same lineup, you will have often either, say a critical actor or director, that's a creative part of the team. You'll have, somebody who is much more hands-on on set, and that is, their role. You'll have the people that are much more the types that they have a production company. They're helping assemble the package, give notes, get the project ready to go take to a buyer, set it up, and then may or may not be involved. They might visit set. I've also had shows where, there was somebody who was in the pitch, and then you're like, oh wait, yeah. Like when you see the premiere, you're like, oh yeah, they're on the show. I forgot about that.
I never saw them.
It's like, and it's everything in between, which is why I think it's like a very funny catch-all title, obviously. So within that feels like its own whole thing where you're like, what role do you want? The studio and the network side can be similar in the sense of like, again, you're all doing a similar thing, trying to help shepherd the notes and like feedback and be that first audience and help, I think in the best version, you're helping, how do you make the best version of the show that you set out to make? Again, I think that depending on the relationship there, the studio is much more the like, all right, we are going to actually manage the process of making it and help hire all those people, get involved on that side and manage the process there. And as a studio exec on the creative side, I think, then also being able to help not just get the project ready, know where to go and the people to reach out to, and help facilitate the sale, the negotiation, and like really get that done in the best way possible so you get the best resources for the show. Because I think the best scenario is you've gotten a way to get a few people interested and then have the luxury of deciding like, all right, we're getting the best money there, felt like the people in the room over here were asking the right questions and understood what the show is, and like all on the table, what's going to be the best home, you know? And like oftentimes I think it's not the one with the biggest paycheck, because
like they're smart but they're rich.
Right. And you gotta unfortunately it's not always the same. So you have to kind of decide. And I get it, in certain cases there's a real draw to, oh, there's going to be more money and all of that and everything that comes along with it. Personally, I feel like great, but if all that money is being spent in ways that are cutting against the show that you want to make fundamentally, like there's not going to be a season 2. So, you know, kind of who cares? And so I would rather personally be in a situation where you're landing in a place that gets the show, has enough resources that you can make it, and then build from there, you know, and like grow in success. So
you must really know people's personalities. Like you probably have to spend a lot of years to get to know, because God, I just feel like the names at different companies change so much, you know? Yeah. So you can't just say like, hey, how's the climate at that network? Like it might be completely different, you know, but it would probably help to know like, oh, I worked with her there and I worked with him there and this is what they're like. And I don't know.
100%. And
or is it all about gossip? Like, how do you know?
I mean, I think it's more like, I think about it like you run into like, especially on the buyer side, when I was on a buyer, like when I was at Stars, there were so many buyers that I knew socially, knew their interests, knew what they were about, knew what they were excited about. You kind of get a sense of, you know, what each individual person really gets jazzed about. And then there's their mandate at where they're at that changes even at the same place, you know?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and so you're kind of always looking at like, all right, how can I come at somebody, like the right person, and then, you know, get them excited about the right thing, knowing what they like and knowing like what's going to be their access point, and you know, kind of come and like tee it up in the right way so that they are kind of set up to love it. And
so the selling begins like with a phone call. So the selling doesn't begin when the team goes into the room and makes the pitch. Like you wouldn't even schedule that pitch unless some good salesmanship had already happened.
And I would say even before that, it's like having the conversation about like, who are we going to call, you know, because, you know, again, and every place operates differently. You know, some places you send it in to someone and they'll kind of find the right person internally, and then they'll tell you, here's who is going to be in the pitch. If you, at other places, if you go into the one person and it's just not for them, like you're done. And it doesn't matter that the other person would have liked it. You know, so you kind of have to know a little bit. And that, I think, is one of the functions of the studio side, is knowing a lot of that, helping to kind of prepare everyone for that, navigate that, prepare the pitches in a way where you kind of have a sense of what, you know, what is the vibe of the room going to be like? Because again, some places are really warm and then they're not going to buy it. There are other places that it's like, man, do they hate us? Did we do something to them?
They're going to pay you in praise and compliments.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to feel great for 2 hours and you will never make a show there. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, you cannot, like, I always feel like when a room is really effusive in a pitch and they love it, it's like, oh, they're not buying it. Like, it's usually the people who are like, yeah, we'll get back to you, who are actually the buyers. And they're, you know, not going to put their cards on the table and be like, we want this, you know.
Or who actively in the room poke holes in it because they're kicking the tires, and they're only kicking the tires because they're thinking about buying it, as opposed to somebody who's not going to buy it and can just go, you are a delight.
Exactly. Yeah. Love it. Yeah.
Love it.
Love it. Yeah, no questions. Love it. No questions.
Thanks for coming in. Anytime you get no questions, you're like, oh, okay. Well,
no questions at all.
It's either going to be really good or really bad. Yeah, so I think it's, you know, helping, and I think that is part of the job, is because, you know, I always think it's kind of a bit of a funny thing to ask, you know, writers to go in and perform in that way. Some people, it's very natural for them. And then other people, they got into this to write, you know, it's not a performance thing for them. And so helping, especially those people, to be as secure, as comfortable, and like set up for success as possible. I think that's a big job on the studio side, and helping navigate all of that. And then on the network side, I think it is, you know, a lot more about thinking about, yes, to the degree that you're actually shepherding it and developing it internally, there's a lot of the same stuff happening. And even the sales, kind of internal sales that happen there, it's navigating it in a much smaller way, but pushing things forward. And then, you're
it's
also
like an
thinking
episode
about
of Dance Moms. Like, two of those girls are going to get a solo, but there are 10 dancers and only 2 of them are going to get a solo. So there's going to be 8 heartbreaks.
I have never seen Dance Moms, but that sounds like a show that I would
It is child abuse. It's just child abuse.
My daughter watches it with like some of her like, tween friends, and it's just like the most toxic thing to hear in the background. It's like, oh my God, I guess it's better than TikTok in that it's at least like more than 10 seconds long, per blip. But oh my God, it's horrible.
It's just a bitter middle-aged woman berating 15-pound children for like, you didn't give enough.
It's horrible. Horrible.
Yeah,
oh man. What is it on? I'm assuming season 20, 21. What are we on?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, probably. It's made money.
I don't really know. I have no idea.
Yeah, but to your point with like pitching and stuff too, it's like you're right. Like Stacey, loves, came up as an actor and is like, oh, finally everyone's looking at me. This is wonderful. Whereas for me, it was like, I started going to therapy because it was so like, played
it's
such
stressful.
an outsized, it was so stressful. And I'm not like a natural public speaker. Like it, I really had to work through some stuff. And basically, at the end of, couple of years of therapy, she was like, just let Drew do most of it because he's good at it. I was like, oh, yeah, totally.
Great.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I gotta save myself a lot of effort. Yeah.
Hey Ken, I got a personal question for you. Do you think Zoom pitches are going to keep going? Does it seem like they keep going? Because one thing I discovered, I've only done a couple of in-room pitches, and you got your notes, but you're pretending not to. It's like at the Oscars, you're pretending not to look at your notes, but you are. And then the great thing about the Zoom pitch was I could minimize my computer, my camera way over there, and then blow up my Word doc. So really all I was doing was the same thing I used to do when I volunteered at my kids' library, which is like, I'm just telling a story. I'm reading it out loud with inflection, but nobody could see that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it was interesting.
Do Zoom pitches keep going, or are they dead?
It's an interesting question because I do think there will be some, but I don't know. There is something, having been on both sides of it, there is something certainly on the buyer side where it's like the intangibles of being in the room with people and kind of understanding, just, I don't know, that in-person dynamic, I think can be, you can get people much more invested, I think. But, also having been on the selling side where you go in and you're like driving all over town, parking, waiting in the waiting room, everyone's waiting. It's just like, it's
John always talks about that awkward thing, like you've done the pitch and now you're in the men's room together and you're like sort of pretending that you didn't just hang out for 45 minutes. Like,
totally. Yeah, it's like, it's a little weird in that way. It's like weird and awkward in a different way, but it's like, I think so. The Zoom part, I mean, man, kind of incredible from the standpoint of like, just knock them out way faster. So I don't know. There's a part of me that hopes it keeps going, and then there's the part of me that's like, I like seeing people and being in the room with them. It's like, a little bit easier to do it that way. So
interesting. Okay, it's in flux then. We will see.
I gotta say, with pitching, there's something nice about being in my familiar space. Like if I'm performing and being performative, to be in a space that I feel really comfortable in, as opposed to like now we're in a glass room, with like, assistants walking by and just feeling like, oh, now we're doing the thing.
Oh man, glass room is actually great to me. We were at Stars, we had these 2 conference rooms where I always felt terrible for people that were in those 2 at the old building, because it was just like these windowless like rooms with just kind of like very dim light. It was kind of one of them was very Dr. Strangelove vibes too. And so I always was like, this would be a weird, I see this every day. This would be a weird room to just walk into. So comfortable space. I get that.
Here's a question. Does a showrunner need a studio?
Oh, and along those lines, can you throw this into, does a showrunner need a producer? Showrunner needs a network, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but go ahead.
Well, I guess interestingly, I feel like almost always, yeah. But then there was that, gosh, what was it? Horace and Pete, the Louis C.K. thing that he did. Yeah. The rare instance in which a showrunner did not need a network, just kind of put it up for purchase. But I think that's a pretty uncommon direct to consumer kind of thing. But yeah, definitely need a network. I think like it depends, and it depends on the project, which I know is like a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but I would always think about it, there are advantages going straight to a network, and there are advantages.
And skipping the studio, you mean?
Yeah, for certain projects and certain setups, and then there are certain instances where it's like I think better to go to a studio. There are benefits, like if it's the type of studio, like MRC when I was there, we would pay writers to write a script, maybe even 2 and a Bible, and like have a lot of material ready to go, then package it, kind of come in with a full, like, here's the whole thing, and it's ready to go. And, hopefully that tees you up for a really big sale, like, Terminal List, Shining Girls, Shrink Next Door. Those were all done in that way.
Wow.
On the studio side, the studio is not going to, especially if it's independent, is not going to be looking at it through one network mandate lens. They're like, is this something, how do we champion a vision that is the most what the person wants to do, but also kind of is going to have a great shot in the market? And on the network side, naturally, they're only thinking about it through what is the best version of this show for us. And I think if you do it right, it's like, if it's aligned and you're in the right place, perfect. Like, you want to be working with those people, and you want to, be developing it in that way. So again, I think it's like, it kind of depends. If you're going straight to series, that's one thing. If you're landing on a development slate there, depending on the place, they can have a huge development slate and only make a few things. Or they could be, kind of a little bit smaller and push stuff forward. When I was at Stars, I think we, like, 1 in about 9 things on the slate would actually make it to the screen, which is a pretty good hit ratio, I'd say. A lot of places were a lot lower than that. So that's kind of a little of the trade-off, is like, you might, if you package it and go straight in, be able to kind of bypass that stuff by getting the direct-to-series sale.
You think working with the studio can improve those chances?
It can. I mean, it's not the only way to do it, certainly. But, that packaging element, that's a lot of what studios, especially independent studios, a lot of what they do to make it as attractive as possible, and kind of get that big sale. It's possible to do it, without the studio and go like it, but, I'd say studios tend to really make that a core of what they do.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's nice too. Like, a studio can really, from a showrunning standpoint, like, a studio can really help you navigate. So, if you're, maybe a newer showrunner, that can be really helpful to have a studio to ask questions like, okay, how are we supposed to, how does this work? How do, it's somebody, you can ask the network too. But sometimes that's depending on what the network has going on, like, sometimes they can be a little spread thin, and and the studio is there to help you facilitate.
Totally.
That's cool.
I think kind of navigate those waters 100%. And I think there are a lot of producers who do that in their own way too. So this is where I say, like, one of the things that I love about what we do is there is no paint by numbers answer to anything. And so, you kind of have to figure out, all right, this is what this project, here's what's important about it, here's what we need to protect, here's what we need to champion, and what is the best route, who are the best partners, and that can look wildly different, And, like, just for instance, since you mentioned Girlfriend Experience, the way that show was made could not be further from the way that something like Terminal List was made. They're like, the scope was wildly different. The approach to production, the way the team was assembled, all of it was so different, and how it came together studio partner and like effectively, just like a team, a creative team, making it, and then distributing it on Stars, just really, really different, but it was exactly the right process for both of those, and so that's, I think, kind of the fun. And yeah, also just finding those right partners who are the people, especially on the writer side. I would imagine it's the same thing, amongst execs. You find the people who you kind of have a similar vision or can speak a similar language as far as like creative approach, and do they really believe in what you are wanting to make. And I think that that ends up being the best version of it. Usually kind of like they're part of the team in an extended way, and an important part to get things actually made and championed and then marketed in the right way, and like getting the support behind it that it needs to be really successful.
That's amazing. And to your point earlier too, like it's the Marsha McLuhan, the media is the message. Like if you're doing, Game of Thrones and, CBS wants to buy it, like that's going to change. You know what I mean?
It's going to look different.
It's going to look different. It's going to feel different.
I'm really curious what the CBS version of Game of Thrones would look like, actually, now that you say it.
Yeah, but like,
could they be cousins? Do they have to be brother and sister? Could they be second cousins? Second cousins. College friends. They're college friends.
But, like you may have an edgy show and be like, but I wanted to, play, everywhere in every household. And it's sometimes a studio can help you be like, or just know the insides, like, oh, that network is in disarray. Like,
right.
There's, word on the street is a bunch of, people are going to leave and any shows they've championed are going to die. Like you can get, they can help improve your odds just by having
a little people, of that. Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit of that that knowledge. All right. Well, when we have a guest on, we like to do what we call the rapid fire 4, which is 4 questions we ask each guest. First one is, what is the first television show you truly loved and why?
I mean, like I said, we got like an hour of TV, and it usually ended up being either animated X-Men when we were younger, or the X-Files, which was that probably would be my one, where it was like a little scary when I was younger in a way that was really exciting and awesome. And also just, I mean, I was obsessed with like aliens and stuff back then. I was like, oh, what is out there? And, it's just like, it was a very fun show that also for me was something where it was like very exciting to see the really imaginative cases of the week, but then also, loving what's the ongoing long arc. And like, frankly, I feel like that is sort of where I love features, but I feel like my brain, like I enjoy the puzzle of TV, and like that is kind of one of those things in terms of that long form storytelling amid, kind of the thing that's going to be really awesome to tune into every week. That was a big one for sure.
That is, I agree. It's so
that.
satisfying when something has a strong, like, procedural case of the week, but it also has a genuinely strong, not just like a slapped on in 2 sentences because you got to do something, but a strong, like, serial element, I guess you call it. That is just so delicious.
It's the best. Yeah.
It's the best. Very satisfying. Question 2. What is your favorite part of the job?
I think I'll go back to, like, what I was saying about, like, the puzzle of putting it together every time. Like, that part I find really fun, whether it's the helping with assembling the writer's room. And obviously that's like ultimately the showrunner's decision, but like, figuring out and discussing with them, all right, here's the different voices and perspectives and, skill sets. And like, also how are people in the room, like thinking about just not how are they on the page, but you're sitting with these people all the time, that, and like, frankly, assembling the team, both there and the wider team for production. And again, if it's from the studio side or the producer side, figuring out how to navigate, getting it teed up in the right way, bringing it to life, it's different every time. And that part is really, really fun to me, because it's like you have this vision that you're like, how do we make this real? And you just kind of have to figure it out. There's like the things that you learn over time that are best practices, and then there's the stuff that's just like, this project is different because of X, and we've got to come at it a different angle. And that part's pretty cool.
I love that. What is the part of the job that costs you something?
I think like the fun of this job, and a lot of why I love it, is that it kind of permeates everything. But I would say the cost of the job is also that it permeates everything in your life. I have a group of friends from undergrad that we get together every year in a different city called The Gathering. And, like they all do wildly different things. I mean, like I said, my undergrad degree was more computer science. So I have a lot of friends that, have worked at startups or Palantir, Amazon, like all of those kinds of places, and then also done their own things, friends that work in kind of engineering, construction, friends in medicine, like, just people that do very, very different things and frankly don't think about what we do a lot. And like there's something fun about kind of just really truly tapping into totally different experiences, going and seeing, kind of what they're up to. And I know we do that. Like part of the fun of what we do is each show kind of is a window into a world and a point of view and a character, but it's like a different way of accessing it. And, I think, we're all, I don't know, for me, our social life and everything we do, it's like full on, about entertainment. And I think there are the great things about that. Everyone that we know here, for the most part, has some access point to it and like knows similar people and can talk about it and relate. And then there's also the times when you talk to somebody outside, you're like, oh, wow, that's super exciting. Let's talk about that. Like, I don't want to talk about TV shows right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great.
If you had a time machine, what one piece of advice would you give yourself when you started your television journey?
So this one, I feel like is a bit of a cop out because it's like, I feel like I was given this advice early on and I really took it to heart.
Perfect.
But I think it's like something just like constantly reminding myself is just like actually kind of building off the last one. It is like we're also in it, and we have this community of people, and like it's all relationships. It's all kind of frankly like building things not over just like the short term, but really the long term. And I remember talking to people who were kind of on the feature side of agencies as assistants, and they were like, oh man, it's so cutthroat. It's like really, it sounded very scary. And then like going into TV, I was like, man, what am I walking into? I'm coming from like basically a group of 30 filmmakers like that are all hanging out together all the time in film school to like, what is going to happen here? And then I met some of my best friends, and I met my wife, and I met like all these people, like, both assistants and agents, and everyone's kind of gone everywhere. And the same thing with writers and directors that I worked with early on. It's just like, like cultivating and really finding within this, crazy business, who are the people that you really click with, in one way or another. And then just, continuing to find out how you can work with them, how you can help each other. Because it's, everyone's in a different spot, and like you were saying, people in executive positions, like what one network looks like today is not how it's going to look like in a year, and like there's the maddening aspect of that. And then there's like kind of the great part where, there's always going to it's always reborn. But the mainstay is, you see the same people all the time, and just really making sure that you're like, I think cultivating and finding those groups that, are supportive and that you can support.
Well, it sounds like find your people. Find your people and be good to them, because it's a long-term relationship, not a short-term relationship.
It's a long game, especially TV.
Yeah, there's the entrepreneur Cody Sanchez, or she might be quoting someone else, like, play long-term games with long-term people. And I love that, I love that, like, just as an adage. And I think to your point, Ken, like there are cutthroat people. And I feel like if you're like, coming into the business, like, I will kill anyone to get what's mine. Like, if you come into the business like that, you're going to find those people, you're going to work with those people. And if you're like, I'm going to find my people here. I'm going to find the people who want to, I don't know, use this as a way to talk about feelings and a way to talk about experiences that matter to me. You're going to find those people and probably 100%. Have a better time, of it than
slightly less stressful. Yeah. This industry is stressful enough that I'm like, needless conflict. I don't know. I'm like, they're the things that you have to fight for and push for. And I think the more that you can just, work with people where it's like, we're all in this together. That's, I feel like, the best version of it. And I feel like it was interesting. I had, a long time ago, read this book that was kind of about closed and open games. And the idea basically of structurally what the incentives that if you're in a game that is just discreetly, there's going to be a winner and a loser here, and there's going to be a 1 and a 0, a W and an L. That creates a certain type of kind of conflict and way of playing. For games that are intended, that kind of repeat or have real longevity, where it's not only is there the game, there's the meta game of we're all going to play each other again. I think the good news about that, and that's kind of TV, is whatever's happening today, there's tomorrow. And, you got to kind of always be thinking about all right, this needs to be built to last in success. And I think actually that kind of, it's nice. It actually, I think in the best version, incentivizes everyone to play well together. Let's find a way to make this work, which I think it's always nice when that happens.
Yeah, I love that.
Well said. If you like our show, would you please consider taking a minute to subscribe and to rate us wherever you get your podcasts? And please tell a friend about the show. That all really helps us find our audience. We will be back next week with more Ken.
All right, thank you.